Okay, so get this. Did you know that up to 67% of postpartum women experience some form of pelvic floor dysfunction? Think about that for a second. It's an absolutely massive number for a condition that can literally upend a person's quality of life. Yet for some reason, it's something we almost never talk about openly. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into this really fascinating intersection between human anatomy, hard clinical data, and the somewhat messy reality of human behavioral psychology. We are going to unpack the science of the pelvic floor, explore exactly why the proven medical treatments for it often fail in the real world, and figure out how we can use the science of habit design to actually, finally, fix the problem. So, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with 1, the unseen muscle hammock. Then, we'll check out 2, the proof that training works. From there, we'll dive into 3, the adherence problem. 4, unpack the COM-B model, and wrap it all up with 5, building a better routine.
All right, part 1, the unseen muscle hammock. Let's talk about the anatomy of the pelvic floor.
Right off the bat, we're dealing with a really tricky fundamental problem. It is incredibly hard to care about a muscle group you literally can't see. The pelvic floor is this complex layer of muscles and ligaments, and it stretches just like a hammock from the pubic bone at the front of your pelvis all the way back to the tailbone. And this unseen hammock? It has massive responsibilities. It supports your abdominal organs, it controls vital bladder and bowel functions, literally keeping the water pipe closed when you cough or sneeze, and it plays a huge role in sexual function too.
But because it's doing so much heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, it's super susceptible to wear and tear. Everyday life events just gradually weaken this crucial support system. We know pregnancy and vaginal childbirth are major risk factors, but they definitely aren't the only ones. Heavy lifting, really high-impact vigorous gym activities, being overweight, chronic straining from constipation, and even the regular coughing you get from smoking can completely overload these muscles. Plus, natural aging and hormonal changes during menopause just kind of add to the weakness. And when this hammock sags, the result is often urinary incontinence, prolapse, or chronic pain.
Moving on to section 2, the proof that training works, efficacy of PFMT.
Okay, so the hammock is damaged. How do we fix it? Well, we look to pelvic floor muscle training, or PFMT. And guys, the clinical data backing this up is just rock solid. Take a look at this number, 8.38. A major Cochrane review actually found that women with stress urinary incontinence who consistently practice PFMT are over 8 times more likely to report a cure than those who get no treatment at all. 8 times, that is huge.
The overwhelming, undeniable weight of clinical evidence completely favors PFMT. When you look at the meta-analysis data, we're talking across decades of trials here, the results heavily and consistently cluster right in favor of pelvic floor muscle training over the control groups. The clinical science is completely settled on this. If you do the exercises, they work remarkably well.
But, here is the twist. If PFMT works so incredibly well and can literally cure such a disruptive physical condition, why is it so hard to stick to? Despite all this massive clinical efficacy, the messy reality on the ground is that almost no one consistently does their exercises over the long term. Which brings us to section 3, the adherence problem, the reality of remote training.
And section 4, unpacking the COM-B model, behavioral science to the rescue.
So traditionally, you might do these exercises in a clinic, right? But today, the burden of accountability in getting the technique right pretty much falls entirely on the individual, sitting alone in their home. To understand why people struggle so much to stick to these remote programs, a recent qualitative study used this fascinating psychological framework called the COM-B model. It basically states that for any specific behavior to happen, 3 elements have to interact: capability, opportunity, and motivation. If even one of those pillars is weak, the behavior simply will not happen. This is actually a super powerful mental tool you can use to understand any habit failure in your own life. Let's break down that first pillar, capability barriers. Capability covers both physical recovery and psychological knowledge. Now, the study identified huge knowledge deficits. A lot of women just didn't understand the preventative value of the exercises if they weren't having severe symptoms yet. Then you have the physical barriers. Sheer exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and incision pain after childbirth simply drain a person's physical capability to exercise. But the absolute biggest barrier here was a skill deficit. There was this deep uncertainty about whether they were actually isolating the correct muscles. Just listen to this participant's experience from the study. Quote, "The videos made it look simple, but when I did it myself, I really couldn't tell whether I was tightening the right muscles." End quote. I mean, imagine how incredibly frustrating it is to train an invisible muscle without any real-time professional feedback. You feel your abdomen tense up, and you just instantly doubt yourself.
And that brings us to opportunity barriers, which really reflect a person's environment. Remote apps always promise to be super accessible, but they often lack any personalized professional support, or they suffer from these clunky, frustrating interfaces. Plus, and this is big, the biggest opportunity barrier of all is often just the fragmented, chaotic reality of newborn caregiving.
As one mother put it perfectly, quote, "Looking after the baby takes up almost the whole day. Even if the exercise only takes a few minutes, it's hard to find those few minutes when the baby is calm and no one needs me." Unquote. It is so vital to realize that non-adherence isn't laziness. Well-intentioned routines are literally destroyed by an environment that robs women of the time to focus on their own recovery.
Finally, motivation barriers. Because pelvic floor progress is totally invisible and the healing process is incredibly slow, motivation naturally just completely tanks. There's no immediate tangible benefit. You don't get that rush of endorphins like you do after a run. Without severe symptoms screaming for attention, the perceived urgency is really low. And because their days are so insanely unpredictable, forming an automatic daily habit feels nearly impossible, which just leads to this deep sense of self-doubt or low self-efficacy.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is that these three domains don't operate in a vacuum. They interact in a vicious cycle. Giving someone a smartphone app doesn't solve the problem if their physical capability is totally depleted by exhaustion and their motivation is destroyed by a lack of feedback. A lack of professional support, which is an opportunity barrier, creates technique uncertainty, a capability barrier, which then in turn totally destroys the self-efficacy and motivation to keep going.
All right, Section 5, building a better routine, actionable solutions.
So how do we actually break this vicious cycle and do these exercises properly? Well, first, we have to fix the capability and technique gap. The British Association of Urological Surgeons gives us very specific steps to isolate the right muscles without just tensing up your abdomen or your legs. First, you sit comfortably. Second, squeeze the muscle around the back passage as if you're trying to stop passing wind. You should literally feel a lifting sensation. Third, imagine you're stopping a stream of urine, bringing those front muscles into play. Lift up inside. And finally, you need to train both types of muscle fibers. So do slow holds, keeping the tension for up to 10 seconds to build endurance, and then do fast lifts, drawing up rapidly for just 1 second, to protect against sudden leaks when you cough or laugh.
But look, just knowing the technique isn't enough on its own. We have to fix the environment and the motivation too. The researchers from the qualitative study proposed this brilliant hybrid care model to bridge the gap. It basically combines the best of both worlds. It starts with an initial in-person visit with a professional just to verify the technique, which eliminates all that crippling self-doubt right away. Then it uses low-friction, really intuitive digital platforms to track progress and remind you to exercise. Crucially, it brings in periodic telehealth follow-ups to maintain accountability. And, maybe most importantly, it actively involves the family through psychoeducation so they can step up and share that caregiving burden, giving the mother the actual opportunity to heal.
Which leaves us with this final thought. The clinical data absolutely proves that pelvic floor training works. But science doesn't happen in a vacuum. Is a medical solution truly effective if it's designed for a perfect world rather than our chaotic, everyday lives? By viewing healthcare through this deeply human lens of behavioral science, we can design systems that don't just work on paper, but actually work for the people who need them the most. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a powerful new perspective. Catch you on the next one.